Hey, this is Miss Bell, and all right, we're going to look at chapter 2.4, which concentrates on sculpture. So, introduction to this. Sculpture can be made from various media, as it says here, glass, wax, plastics. The main concept is that it's going to be, and we're going to review this from before in part 1, either freestanding, in the round, or relief. So freestanding, if you'll remember, is where you can walk completely around it. That's why it's also known as in the round. And this sculpture definitely encourages the viewer to get engaged from different viewpoints. Now relief can be a low relief or it can be a high relief. But either way, the relief has a support, so you can't just walk completely around it as you would with an in the round sculpture. Now a bust is basically a sculpture that's a portrait of a person from the shoulders up, typically someone of authority and power. All right, so let's look at methods of sculpture. We're going to see subtractive, where the artist has to remove part of the media, and then also additive, where they're building it up to construct the sculpture. So carving would be a subtractive. They chip, carve, sand, polish it. I like this example because it actually shows you where he has, I don't even technically know the name of this, but I know he's hammering, it's a type of hammer. He's hammering it into the end of his chisel, and he's creating the sculpture. And here are some of the variety of chisels that are available. And I just thought this was really beautiful. This is an artist. He was featured in an article, and just look at how delicate he's able to carve something that looks, if you painted it to look in the colors of the plant, I mean, it would almost look real. The textures are just, he did a phenomenal job with it. Now, a lot of artists also carve from marble. Here's a marble quarry, and that's where a lot of the artists would have their marble slab. They would cut sections out. And then they're similar, but they're slightly different. Of course, because marble is so much more of a coarse, hard material versus the wood, which is a lot softer to cut through, they have a different set. Michelangelo was not able to finish this one on the right, but you can see how he slowly starts to have a man, emerge from that marble slab. Modeling is an additive process. It's where the artist builds it up. And so you can see that here are some cutting tools, like we were talking about removing, but you can do that, but it's typically used for adding, and you can see the little ends there look different for pushing either wax or clay, which are the typical modeling materials. So in this top image, y'all might have heard of a wax museum where they have an artist who made wax sculptures of celebrities. And so The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, he's right behind his copy. So this is entirely made of wax. And that one actually looks pretty good, but I've seen some awful reproductions, not in person, but just on TV of wax museums. Now at the bottom, you can see this is an unfinished piece, but this one's not wax like the other. This one is made from clay, and they're slowly using coils and building up to make what looks like, I guess, a person, a kid maybe. And armature is basically a skeleton or framework. You can see here, it's made of metal, and then they build up like by modeling around it with clay or wax, and that just gives it stability. Casting is a really difficult process to explain because it has so many steps involved, but overall, what you should know is that it takes a pliable material. That means one that's easy to break, like ceramics. You think of how many times have we broken a coffee mug, or glass, or, well, not really glass. I guess that was a bad example. I mean, it is a breakable material, but for casting, they would use wax or clay. And they make a mold from it, a plaster mold. And then they take it from there and pour hot metal. So let me just show you the steps. Here's the final artwork. And this is made with bronze. And here's the steps. So you can see the skeleton. They build it up with the wax by modeling. Then they create, the blue is plaster. They create a plaster mold, and there are little holes left at the end. And when they heat up the sculpture, the plaster stays hard, but the wax melts out. And so then we have a hollow. You can see right here, it's hollow on the inside. And then they heat up the metal so hot that it's no longer hard. It becomes in a molten liquid state, and they pour it into the plaster mold. And then once it's cooled down and it hardens, then they break the plaster off and you get the sculpture. Patina is actually when metals age, and certain metals kind of have different color, or also the method of oxidation can cause it to look more green or more blue. And if you don't want to wait for a long period, like a year, to see that happen, artists have created different formulas using vinegar and Miracle-Gro, so various combinations to have patina within one day. So that's available. So earthworks is, we're going to actually talk more about that in part 3, but that's where the artist is inspired by nature. In this case, an artist is inspired by this serpent mound made by Native Americans in Ohio. And what the artist did is he got a group and they took a lot of the beach and piled all of that sand and dirt until it made a spiral near the edge of the Salt Lake. And you can see how they are related to each other, how he's inspired by the Native American mound. Ready-mades, those basically it says that as any found object can become a work of art. Let me show you an example of this. So I'm going to go back up, but this is considered a ready-made, or you could also call it a found object. The artist literally found the urinal in the hall, in an alleyway, and submitted it to an art exhibition and called it art. And then we have the whole, what is, what's art and what isn't. So let's not jump into that. That's something we'll look at part 3 a little bit in depth, but just know that with ready-mades. Now, appropriation is also popular. We have the original Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci from the Renaissance, and the value of it is very, it's high. Like there's this sense of authority in the way that he paints because of how realistic it is and the layers, and just there's a glow about her. Now, Marcel Duchamp, the same artist that actually has the urinal, created an etching of Mona Lisa and added the goatee and little mustache. So his is mocking the original and is mocking fine art and is supposed to be humorous. And then third, this came around maybe 20, 30 years after the Duchamp version of Mona Lisa. Andy Warhol made silkscreen prints, and he titled this 30 is Better Than 1, which has another meaning that's different from the other two. This one, it pushes consumerism, but they're all appropriated from the original Mona Lisa. Now here's another found object, like I mentioned, the urinal. The artist just took rocks and said, hey, this is art. I'm going to present it as art. And that's, again, called a ready-made or found object. I wanted to show you another example of that. So here's that urinal I mentioned, and then there's a contemporary artist. Her name escapes my mind at the moment, but she made a golden plated version of the urinal, and that was appropriation. And then, I mean, it's kind of anywhere, but then I thought this was kind of funny that there were, and you can see the signature is the same here on the left, but the urinals made into earrings and they're for sale on Etsy if you are interested. But this is called an assemblage, and it uses found objects as well. It has the seat of a bicycle that's been welded to the handlebars to make a bull. Now, if you'll remember, this is a review. Kinetic sculptures are moving sculptures, in this case moved by wind currents. Installation we have not discussed yet, but we will come back to it again in part 3. What an installation is, the artist is asked to come to the gallery or museum or to a space. It could be mostly indoor, but sometimes outside. And they're asked to recreate that space with a new, kind of a new experience for their visitors. So this is the same space. It's called the Turbine Hall. It's located in the Tate Modern in London. You can kind of tell that from the windows in the far back. And one artist's interpretation of the space was rather playful. They created a slide, and that is the artwork. It's a slide in the Turbine Hall. Another artist installed mirrors in the ceiling, put hundreds of light bulbs, and let a mist come out. So it wasn't playful. It was instead relaxing and kind of, you just felt warm. You could look at your own reflection. It was just a new experience from the slides. And then third, someone had a totally different idea. You've got a garden actually that people can walk through, but yet it's still indoors and inside that industrial look at the Turbine Hall. So three very different installations. This is an artist that I saw. He had a light installation exhibit at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, and it was really beautiful. Okay, and we will stop there.